right now, so it'll be okay. All right, going over the nervous system, I'll just back up a little bit. We talked about the central nervous system and peripheral system. The central nervous system would be any part protected by bone. So you don't have to have me in it as long as it's bone. And that would be like the spinal cord and the brain. And then the peripheral system would be all the things that branch. That would be the cranial nerves, 12 pair of cranial nerves, and then 31 pair of spinal nerves. They all are protected by bone. Okay, then we studied the autonomic versus the somatic system. Somatic system would be parts of the brain, parts of the spinal cord, parts of the nerves that go to skeletal muscles. The autonomic system would be different parts of the brain, such as the cingulate gyrus, brain stem, etc., and different parts of the spinal cord, and different parts of the nerve that go to smooth muscle and cardiac muscle. And smooth muscle would be muscle we find in the walls of the, I know, I was like, looking at people's feet. It'll be a different one. Okay, the walls of the blood vessels and the GI tract, etc., would be smooth, and then cardiac muscle would be the force of the heart. But the autonomic system deals with those. And then on the two divisions of the autonomic system, you have the sympathetic division and the parasympathetic. And the sympathetic is also called the thoracolumnar. So starting with the thoracic region, you have a pair of ganglia. It's just shown on one side. There's little yellow dots through here. That represents your sympathetic ganglia, the ganglia of the chain. And then, so it's going down. And then there are collateral ganglia. The collateral ganglia we have shown over here on the urinary model that shows the blood vessels. I need to back up this way. You get in the trash can. Now, okay, you got the, all right, here shows the descending abdominal aorta, and the green dots here are just clay, but it's representing the collateral sympathetic ganglia. This would be the celiac ganglion, also called the solar plexus. It's right over the celiac artery, which is number 2. The superior mesenteric ganglion is right over the superior mesenteric artery. The inferior mesenteric ganglion is right over the inferior mesenteric artery. So on the autonomic system, you have 2 final motor neurons. One that starts in the spinal cord, brainstem or spinal cord, and goes out to a ganglion, and the second one that's entirely outside the central system. In the sympathetic, you've got the ganglia of the chain, and then you've got the collateral ganglia. If the cell body is here of neuron 2, it would go from here on the way, all the way to the organ or blood vessel, etc. In the parasympathetic, you can have ganglion 1, neuron 1, starting, let's say, it'd be cranial nerves 3, 7, 9, or 10. So 10 would be part of the brain stem. And it would come out to maybe the ganglia, pass through the hiatus, on down to the small intestine, and it would synapse in the ganglia here that are part of the organ. And this represents the small intestines. And then you have the mucous membrane from here out, submucosa, muscularis, and serosa, serous membrane. But between these 2 layers of muscle, you have some parasympathetic ganglia. So neuron 1 of the parasympathetic, for example, the vagus nerve, would come here, would release acetylcholine because it's cholinergic, and neuron 2 would start an impulse and go out to the muscle or to the glands here and stimulate them. And those cells are also cholinergic because they only release acetylcholine. In the sympathetic system, neuron 1 is always cholinergic. Neuron 2 could be either cholinergic or adrenergic. The blood vessels here in the small intestine would be controlled by the sympathetic system. And if it shuts off the blood supply, then everything stops. So that's how the sympathetic can control, particularly during the stress response. It closes off the blood supply to the GI tract, etc., and sends it on to the heart and the lungs. But the parasympathetic, then by way of the vagus, would then, after the stress is over, would stimulate these structures, the muscles and glands, to start secreting again. So 2 final motor neurons on the autonomic system. Neuron 1, whether it's sympathetic or parasympathetic, is said to be the preganglionic neuron. In both cases, it releases acetylcholine, so they're both cholinergic. Then neuron 2 in the autonomic system is called the postganglionic neuron. And with the sympathetic system, it's a long neuron. It started in the collateral ganglia or ganglia in the chain and goes all the way to the structures, even to the muscles, your blood vessels, say in the big toe. It could either be cholinergic to release acetylcholine, or it could be adrenergic. And in the parasympathetic system, neuron 2 starts in the ganglia in the organ. It goes just a short distance, and it's always cholinergic. Okay, we're moving along here. All right, so we've taken care of these two. Now, as I was showing you before, this is showing the spinal cord. Yeah, that's protected. So this part would be part of the central system because it's being protected by the bone, right? And the gray matter is sort of orange looking inside, and the white's around the outside. The gray matter is non-myelinated, the white is myelinated. Did I say that wrong?
No, just, I just realized that that thing you kept drawing was spinal cord.
Good. That's great. All right, now, as I mentioned, okay, the spinal nerves have the cervical plexus and the brachial plexus. Now, these models, the brachial plexus is shown here, yellow. Okay, that represents the brachial plexus, and it's going to service the nerves from the shoulder, and if you want to sit down, it's okay, shoulder and arm. And so here is our arm model, and we see the yellow here. The yellow is representing the nerve. And so right under the collarbone, the clavicle, would be your brachial plexus, and then in the armpit would be the axillary nerve, and then in the arm, the brachial, and then it moves on down, and on the thumb side, that's where the radius is, this nerve, 59, I believe it is, 59 is the radial nerve, and then in the middle, 65, etc., that would be the median, it's in the middle, and then it looks like an 85 there. And on the little finger side, that would be the ulnar. And so those are the nerves. You have brachial plexus, axillary nerve, brachial nerve, radius, median, and ulnar nerves.
Which one's the actual?
It's under the armpit.
Okay.
Just the armpit region. Remember the axilla is the armpit? That's the axillary nerve. Okay. And then we go on. Now, there's no thoracic plexus. The anterior rami and the thoracic nerves just move forward and become the intercostal nerves. And then when you get down in the lumbar region, there's a regrouping of the anterior rami to form the lumbosacral plexus. And the only model we have that shows the lumbosacral is this one. The X here represents the lumbosacral plexus. And it continues on, and the sciatic nerve will come off of that. These other little yellow strings coming off, those would be probably the anterior rami of the spinal nerves. That would be part of the parietal. So you have the central system, and then you have the peripheral system. I said peripheral system because it's branching from the brain spinal cord.
Did you say
median would be
65?
Yeah, right there. Yellow. Okay, and then here shows the sciatic nerve on the hip. Because that would be, I might say, nerve 41B is a branch of which plexus? It would be of the lumbosacral plexus. Okay, and then that's the largest nerve in the body, the sciatic nerve. And then in the knee area, remember that region is called popliteal. Well, the blood vessels there and the nerves there are the popliteal. So the yellow is the popliteal nerve, the arteries, the popliteal artery, the veins, the popliteal vein. But that's number 42 yellow. It's behind the knee, you know, the bend of the knee. That's popliteal, and it goes on to others, but those are the only ones you have to learn. All right, then we move on to the brain. Okay, now remember the brain is going to be inside the skull, so that would be part of the central system. And we have the cerebrum and the cerebellum, and what I'm showing here is the fifth lobe. Now on the cerebrum, there are actually 5 lobes. There's the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe. On the side is the temporal lobe, and then there is a fifth lobe called the insula. And that works with the temporal lobe for hearing. If you will, come over a little closer to this model.
Oh, I'm bringing right this way.
Okay.
Brother Joe about to take over.
All right. Okay. All right. Now that's showing right through here. Yeah, imagine just getting tired. Okay, we go right through here. Okay. Here we go. Got to go that way. Okay.
You see the temporala was for hearing?
The temporal lobe.
Okay.
Okay, you have, so now put it all together. So we have the frontal lobe, this is the left hemisphere. The frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe at the back for vision, and then the temporal lobe for hearing, and then we pull this apart, we can see that fifth lobe, which is called the insula or island of Real. Island, Real, capital R-E-I-L, it's a person's name. Okay, and on the inside here, we turn it, this is sagittal cut. We have the white matter that goes around and connects the two hemispheres. If you remember, the white matter, that represents the corpus callosum, and then we have the fornix, which is a continuation, and then the thin membrane is the septum pellucidum. Then we have the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and then inside the skull we can see the pituitary. The pink inside there is the pituitary. It's like a
This thing?
right there.
Okay.
Shows on some of those. It's X on that one.
Gotcha.
Okay, so you have the thalamus and hypothalamus. The thalamus is a relay station for almost all sensory information coming in through the spinal cord, etc. And then the hypothalamus is a small area. It's below the thalamus, but it's going to control the pituitary, and it's also part of the limbic system. The limbic system is your emotional brain. It involves the thalamus, hypothalamus, the cingulate gyrus, the hippocampus, several other parts, but that's your emotional brain. Okay, this is the diencephalon, thalamus and hypothalamus. Then you have the midbrain, the pons viroli, and the medulla oblongata. The midbrain has centers for putting yourself in an upright position. It also has some gray matter that's part of the reticular formation. That shows better on this green brain. I think one of the videos I had shows the green brain. Turn it this way and that way. Both of them show it. So we can do it that way. Okay, so on this particular green brain, we can see it, little streaks right through there, number 51. That represents gray matter in the brainstem, which is called the reticular formation or reticular activating system. And it has to be sending impulses up to the higher brain, the cerebrum, particularly the cingulate gyrus, for you to be alert and awake. If it stops firing, you may just fall asleep in the middle of activity. That would be called narcolepsy. If it's the reticular activating, or RF, a reticular formation, also called reticular activating system. In psychology, they talk a lot about that. Okay, but narcolepsy is when that misfires. Epilepsy is when you have a misfiring in the motor area. Remember your last convolution in the frontal area. But this particular brain doesn't have numbers on it, so I would use one that shows numbers a little bit better. Okay, or shading. Here's our green. It looks sort of green to me. I call it the green brain.
That's what I have it as.
It's not sick or anything. It's just a coloration, yeah.
You need that.
Yeah, it's a cerebellum. We'll get that in a minute. But on this one, you have the frontal lobe, and then here's the parietal. But the last convolution of the frontal lobe, that's your pre-central gyrus. The gyrus is all these little twisting turns. That's your primary motor. And then the first convolution in the parietal is your primary sensory. So, and the number here, in the green brain, in the green brain, I make new words. Okay, this is the frontal lobe. That's number 15. It's this pinkish area. That represents your primary motor. And then the greenish, or a little bit bluish green here, which is 16 and 4. I think that's 4. That's your primary sensory area, and it's in the parietal lobe. Occipital has several numbers, so any one of those numbers would work for occipital for vision. And then temporal is right under this large artery here is your middle cerebral artery, and it's right over the Sylvian or lateral impression there, sulcus. And so all of that would be temporal. That would all be for hearing. Also under the temporal lobe is sense of smell on the underside, but hearing on the side. Okay, now in the motor area, this frontal motor, there's also an area right near the temporal, but still in the frontal, that's called Broca's motor speech. And you have to have that working in order to be able to say words. Okay, that's pretty much got them all here. You can turn it inside again. We see the corpus callosum. We see the septum pellucidum, that's the thin membrane that separates the two ventricles. We see the fornix, which is just a continuation of the corpus callosum to connect the two hemispheres. Shows the thalamus, and that bluish red here represents the choroid plexus. Remember the mass of capillaries with ependymal cells that filter blood to form cerebrospinal fluid, the hypothalamus. Here's the midbrain, pons viroli, medulla oblongata. The arbor vitae is the white matter in the cerebellum, and the bundles of white matter that connect the cerebellum to the brainstem are called peduncles. superior peduncles, middle, and inferior. Superior is really the only one with the number here. And the cavity there is the fourth ventricle. You have two lateral cavities, two lateral ventricles, and then you have one around the thalamus is the third, and then there's a little tiny passageway called the aqueduct of Sylvius, or cerebral aqueduct, that carries the fluid down to the fourth ventricle. And then from there it can go out the central canal, out the sides, down the back, back up, and finally it drains back into circulation through these structures called the arachnoid granulations, little red dots here. I had a brain like this that had numbers and letters on it, and I can't find it.
Would you call like the Broca's motor speech like 13, or would you say it was?
I wouldn't ask a number.
Okay.
I would just say something in this general area.
Okay.
There's not really one that shows the number.
Okay, so
and it's on the left hemisphere. It's not on the right
Okay,
hemisphere. Just on the left hemisphere. Okay, and then inside here. Now, this is neat. It shows the pituitary. Notice what else? It shows the eye in here with some of those extrinsic muscles. Remember, the cranial nerves go to those extrinsic muscles. You have the superior rectus, which would be oculomotor. You have the lateral rectus, which would be the abducens nerve that stimulates it. You have the superior oblique fitting through a little pulley. That's a tiny little cute little pulley there. Okay, the pulley is called the trochlea. I tried to make a letter there. And then it attaches at an angle. Well, that superior oblique muscle is innervated by which nerve? Trochlear.
I was saying
Trochlear nerve. It fits through the trochlea, and all you got to do is add an R to it, and you've got the name of the nerve. And then all the others are innervated by oculomotor.
So X would be, you said it earlier.
Is
The
it
pink
oh,
X.
that pink.
Pituitary.
That pink X is the pituitary. Okay. Very good, Carl. All right, so that's a neat one. And this one has I don't see any that really show a number for the Broca's motor speech, but you do see a little area for the ventricle. See, this would fit in right there, and so the cavity there is the ventricle. See the little ventricle. Normally has its septum pellucidum separates it. And so what's inside the ventricles that form cerebrospinal fluid? What's the name of the mass of the capillaries? Starts with a C. C-H-O, choroid plexus. Together, let's say it. Choroid plexus. Very good. All right.
And that forms what?
It forms, the ependymal cells surround it. They filter blood to form cerebrospinal fluid. And it finally drains around all around and finally gets back into blood circulation in this superior sagittal sinus by way of these arachnoid granulations. You have a picture that shows them. One of the pictures you're supposed to study. Okay, now here we have the lung. We have blood vessels. The blood vessels here, arteries and veins, no, they're just reversed. We know that in the lung, if it's red, it's a branch of the pulmonary vein. If it's blue, it's a branch of pulmonary artery. The lighter blue will be the branches of the trachea, bronchi, bronchioles. But the muscles of the blood vessels are controlled by the which division of the autonomic nervous system? Starts with an S. Sympathetic division. Right.
Like that.
Almost all blood vessels of the body are controlled by sympathetic. X here is representing the diaphragm. The diaphragm is stimulated by the phrenic nerve.
I think he just paralyzed himself.
The phrenic nerve. The phrenic nerve, okay, comes off the brachial plexus, which is that on the arm, and the phrenic nerve, though, gets most of its fibers from which cervical nerve? It's not one, it's not two, it's not three, but
Four.
four.
Almost at five.
All
Yes,
right.
five.
Most of the fibers for the phrenic nerve come from the fourth cervical nerve. Now, not the cranial nerve. We're talking about the cervical in the neck. So that's why somebody has a spinal cord injury, a neck injury, that could be dangerous. They could not be,
Yeah, when I
not be
snap my
breathing.
neck and get myself
Yeah. Okay, don't do that. Okay.
Well, I popped it, it hurt.
All right, now I have on this all about the lobes. Now we'll be able to keep this out because nobody else is in this lab until Wednesday, so we'll be able to keep this out.
So will
Which
we
will
come back
help.
in here during class on Tuesday?
You can,
Okay.
rather than having to haul it back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay, now this shows a section of a plastic. This is a real brain. This is probably somebody with Alzheimer's, maybe, or some other disease condition. Okay, so you see the lighter areas, that's some kind of disease area. This would be a coronal cut, slice, and this was a sagittal cut. So you see the dark would be called the gray matter, and the lighter is the white. It's at the cerebrum, and then here's, I can't see the cerebellum here, we see the pons roli. Okay, we do see the ventricles though, that's the ventricles here. And then this part connecting the two hemispheres, E, is the corpus callosum. All right, then the slice this way, I'll turn it this side. You see the dark, it's the gray, and then the white, these association fibers. And then deep down inside is some gray matter. That's the basal ganglia. And that's the part that stabilizes motor information when it's leaving the cerebrum. Okay, and then here's the cerebellum with the white matter. What's the white matter called there? Arbor vitae, tree of life. It looks like the arbor vitae tree. Actually, I didn't know what one was because I had to study the cerebellum. But then somewhere somewhere they had arbor vitae street. I said, oh, cerebellum. Okay. But it's a plant that has lots and lots of little. See all the white? It's in the cerebellum. All the white matter is really the tracks that came in just branch out. Okay, cerebellum has to do with your muscle coordination. And then we have the same thing on all these others. Now, this one, this shows the corpus callosum, but then here's this gyrus all above the corpus callosum. Remember, that's your cingulate gyrus. That's your higher autonomic center. Your higher autonomic center. As long as it's sending information out of the brainstem communicates here, then a person can be alive. They may not be awake, but they can be alive. That's why somebody in a coma still digests food and the heart. But it's just that as long as that's communicating. But that's, so if I say identify the cingulate gyrus by number, that'd be pretty easy.
9.
Right.
Oh yeah, the only number.
Or it might be number or letter. In that case, it's an X. It's the same thing. Each one you need corpus callosum, cingulate gyrus, the lobes, the arbor vitae of the cerebellum.
Wait, can you point to the corpus callosum again?
The white.
The white matter? Okay.
Some of them has a number, a letter, some of them doesn't.
Okay.
That's the corpus callosum.
Is this gonna be an actual test question right here?
Possibly.
Oh, goodness.
Okay, maybe you need to know this study. In the fornix, the septum pellucidum, which separates the membrane that separates the two ventricles, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, choroid plexus. The pineal body is shown here. I think over here it's number 23 when it's numbered on these pink brains. It's not so easy to see.
23, this little knobby thingy?
Right, but it's called the third eye because it has fibers from the retina that connect with this and send messages to it. And when it gets enough messages because of the amount of day length hours and the number of hours of daylight, then it releases hormones that bring about migration in animals that migrate. It brings about the puberty in children as they're adolescents as they're maturing. All right, then the arbor vitae again. So same thing over and over and over and again on the different brains. Corpus callosum, cingulate gyrus above it, septum pellucidum, fornix, thalamus, hypothalamus, pineal body, aqueduct, cerebral aqueduct or aqueductus sylvius, fourth ventricle, cerebellum with arbor vitae, midbrain, pons roli, medulla oblongata. Okay, I think let's come over up around me. So,
I'm trying to remember.
well, hopefully it's just a review. Now, if you turn this over, remember you see the cranial nerves. And on some of these, it has the cranial nerves numbered, and they're numbered with Roman numerals. Like Roman numeral 1 is your olfactory, Roman numeral 2 is your optic, which is the second one. 3 is oculomotor, 4 is trochlear, 5 is trigeminal, and so on. So you need to know your 12. Maybe 1 and 2 is probably all I'll ask you over on the actual model. But now let's look at the facial muscles. We have, we have several muscles here, facial and muscles for chewing. It said identify the muscles innervated by the facial nerve. Well, the muscles for facial expression would be occipitofrontalis, also called epicranius, the orbicularis oculi around the eye, orbicularis oris around the mouth, nasalis over the nose, zygomaticus minor, zygomaticus major, buccinator, the mentalis, platysma coming up. All of those are innervated by the 7th cranial nerve.
So, like, if that was a question, would you want the letter or would you want all of those written out?
No, I might ask which cranial nerve innervates number 8, letter H.
H,
That's the
okay.
buccinator, so it would be the 7th. All right, which cranial nerve innervates H and also has sensory part for taste buds, it would still be 7. The 7th cranial nerve is both sensory and motor. Okay, then the ones for for mastigation or chewing, that would be temporalis, which is E, and the masseter is cut away. Masseter is shown over here on this side. It doesn't have a letter to it. And then the pterygoids are underneath, and that would be the 5th cranial nerve. But the sensory part of the 5th cranial nerve would be sensations of heat, cold, pressure, pain. If you got sand in your eye, if you bit your tongue, if you had a toothache, you had a sinus infection, you're feeling that over the sensory part of the 5th cranial nerve. We first just talked about the motor part for chewing, but it also is called the great sensory nerve of the head. 2 more, the sternocleidomastoid and trapezius. Those 2 are innervated by the 11th cranial nerve, spinal accessory.
Sternocleidomastoid is huge.
It starts with the sternum and clavicle and goes to the mastoid process and allows you to bend your head, flex your head, or turn your head side to side. And then the trapezius allows you to shrug your shoulders. It also extends the head and hyperextends.
So on that one would be K.
K.
Sternocleidomastoid.
And then I don't have another letter for this one, but here's the trapezius. But it would be the 11th cranial nerve. Okay. So here we have blood vessels and you have the heart. So the cardiac muscle is innervated by its own conduction system, but which is influenced by sympathetic and parasympathetic division. So I said, which division of the autonomic system stimulates the muscles in this organ to contract, to increase activity? That would be sympathetic. Which division causes it to decrease? And that would be parasympathetic, by way of the vagus nerve, actually. Now the blood vessels themselves, the walls of the blood vessels are innervated by the sympathetic.
So sympathetic
Is the muscles and smooth muscle and cardiac muscle. Parasympathetic just goes, just not the muscle itself, it goes to the conduction system, pacemaker and AV node, to slow it down. Okay, then we have, what happened to Jay?
Sorry, I was talking to you.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, so we have the transverse colon, you have the small intestine. Here is the great omentum or lace apron. Okay, the walls here, of course, of smooth muscles, so that would be, now the neat thing here, the parasympathetic does control the normal activity of the digestive tract. So the muscles in the intestines could be activated by parasympathetic vagus because it's the normal activity secretions, but the blood vessels in it are always by the sympathetic. So I tried to do this. Normal activity including secretions in organ 22 here. Is it 22? And this would be, which cranial nerve would be the 10th cranial nerve, and it's part of which division? It would be part of the parasympathetic. Even though there is smooth muscle here, but under the parasympathetic system, it does control activities of the digestive tract. Okay, now here we have a special hypophyseal portal system. You have capillaries of the hypothalamus, capillaries of the anterior pituitary, and they're connected by a larger vessel, so that's a portal system. Okay, and then we have on this side, you have cells up in the hypothalamus, and their axons come down to the posterior pituitary. So the hypothalamus is controlling the pituitary. That's just a special system. During the stress response, the hypothalamus activates the sympathetic system to let you run, fight, stand there, shake, shift the blood flow, etc. At the same time, it releases a hormone into the system to go to the anterior pituitary. It releases a hormone that goes to the adrenal cortex and causes the steroids to be released from the adrenal cortex. The adrenal medulla is modified sympathetic
So
tissue.
the blue is the hypopituitary?
It's called the pituitary portal system. It's also called the hypophyseal portal system. The hypophysis and the pituitary are the same thing. It's just two different names for the pituitary. The hypophysis, Hypophysis, is the same thing as the pituitary, Pituitary.
So, like, when you say blue, are you saying the royal blue or the
The
baby
light blue and the royal blue together. They should have just a bigger vessel.
Mm-hmm.
Capillaries here, capillaries here. Two sets of capillaries connected by a bigger vessel.
Okay.
And then after the second set, it goes back to the heart. So that's a portal system. Anytime you have two sets of capillaries connected with a bigger vessel, And then it's not until the second set that the blood goes back to regular circulation to the heart. That's why it's called a portal system. The biggest portal system would be capillaries from all these organs going to the liver through the hepatic portal vein. We studied that next semester, if you're in second semester.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know if you take second semester or not, but these are coming in from the small intestine, large intestine, and here, and then from here into the liver, and then it goes through all the capillaries of the liver, and then it goes back to the incommunicator. That's amazing. We are wonderfully and gloriously made. I've already gone over this and this. Now, one more thing here on the skin. Okay, we have, of course, we know that's a cutaneous membrane, and you've got the epidermis, dermis, hypodermis. Fat, anywhere in the body, is activated, put to action, and mobilized so you can use it for energy by the sympathetic system. You go to that chart in your book that compares sympathetic and parasympathetic, and it has some places where the sympathetic is active and there's no parasympathetic. Well, when it has something about sympathetic and it says no effect for parasympathetic, that means the parasympathetic is not releasing anything. So fat's one place. You have sympathetic, no parasympathetic. Erector pili, the sympathetic stimulates this. You don't have to have the parasympathetic to stop it. The sympathetic just stops sending information, impulses, and so then it relaxes. The sweat gland, sympathetic, no parasympathetic. Most blood vessels of the body, sympathetic, no parasympathetic. So those are some places. Adrenal medulla, the inside of the adrenal gland, is sympathetic and no parasympathetic. Everywhere else in the body, you have both of them, and they act as a check and balance.
So pretty much the skin, it's just sympathetic.
Yes, I think you're right.
Okay.
I can't think of any other place parasympathetic would be. So now the salivary glands, some of those are part of the cranial nerve, so that'd be parasympathetic. Or digestion.
But like, say, like the skin on your arm, it's pretty much all sympathetic.
It's going to be controlling most everything. Very good. That's a good point. Okay, and so here's the same thing. It's just the sweat glands, the erector pili muscle, blood vessels. Now this green, it looks like a little target. That is the beginning of the receptor. That's the receptor for pressure. Like if you press real hard or somebody squeezes your hand, you feel that's where the impulse will begin. Sodium will go in, potassium goes out, sweeps them down, finally goes to the spinal cord, up to the thalamus, and the thalamus to the brain for your skin area. So say that's on the back of the arm, and then you feel pressure. It responds to that, so you have the sensation of pressure, But those are receptors. So receptors are the beginnings of the dendrite of the sensory neuron. Sweat gland, okay, erector pili. Okay, here we have blood vessels. Blood vessels in almost all the body. The only place you have both sympathetic and parasympathetic division coming to the blood vessels would be in the external genitals. Everywhere else, you'd have just sympathetic, no parasympathetic. So primarily the muscle here is controlled by the sympathetic division. And then we start on the eye and the ear. And I've got videos of that already, so we can stop.